The hotel sat like a polished memory on West 44th, a narrow slice of Art Deco in a canyon of glass. New York had a way of making the past look staged, but the Ashbury didn't need help. Its brass trim caught the daylight like a coin flashed by a magician, and the revolving door at the entry pushed that light inward, where a lobby of black marble and onyx columns turned it into glimmer and suggestion. A chandelier rained crystal in a perfect oval. If you stood beneath it and looked up, its rings spiraled like a galaxy held still. Steve, Mary, and Paul had come to town to be reminded of what city noise felt like, what it meant to live, where every block sold a new reason to stay out late. Even the sidewalk outside the Ashbury coughed up the city's constant percussion horns pecking at the air, a bus wheezing like an asthmatic animal suitcase wheels scuffing cabs grumbling at red lights. Steve grinned up at the marquee. "Old place," he said, "caught between eras. Like me." Mary tilted her sunglasses, skimming a fingertip over the filigree carved into the revolving door's handle. "It's beautiful," she said. "I feel like I'm walking into a movie." Paul didn't say anything. He was busy recording the entry for the travel channel he'd been nurturing small but loyal audience, the kind that watched his videos to decide where to spend anniversaries and bonus checks. His mic picked up the shy shiver of the chandelier, and the hush of the lobby's AC sliding across marble, and the tick, just one, of an old floor register settling. Inside the front desk, clerk wore a black suit too immaculate to be a coincidence. He had the polished patience of someone who'd listened to too many long complaints delivered as jokes. "Welcome to the Ashbury," he said, sliding forward a guest book, a pen like a fountain, but probably not. "2 Queens corner room, 19th floor." 19th, Mary said, then caught herself. "Sorry. I've heard about this place. The elevator." The clerk's smile fended off superstition like sunblock. "Our elevators were refitted last year," he said. "Brought up to code, blessed by an inspector, and according to rumor, every saint we could think to invite." He winked. "But rumors are not legally binding." Paul lifted the camera just enough to catch the desk plate, Ashbury Hotel EST. 927, and then shifted to the lobby's backbone a pair of elevators in bronze frames doors, etched with a sunburst so fine you could mistake it for a spider web. In the fluted metal between the doors, mounted like an idol, an arrow dial from the old days pointed to numbers in a perfect arch, B, L2 through 19. From the elevator bank, there came a soft mechanical murmur, a breathy undercurrent like the hotel exhaling through hidden lungs. Steve rolled his shoulders. "If I don't hear a haunted cough from behind those doors, at least once he said I'm demanding a refund." Mary elbowed him. "Stop it." The bellman, a woman in a plum vest with a name tag that read Joe, pointed them toward the right car. She was cheerful without being forced, the kind of person you trusted with a small secret. "The Ashbury keeps weird hours," she said. "You'll like it here. She doesn't sleep much." She, Paul asked. "The city," Joe said, then glanced toward the etched doors. "And the hotel, I guess." The right elevator gave a low ding that was less a sound than a decision it didn't rise so much as choose to stop. The doors parted. The car's interior was black walnut and brass, a narrow mirror framed with a rail that asked for white gloves. Someone had polished that brass with a fervor bordering on devotion. It was the kind of shine that didn't reflect faces so much as impressions of faces. They stepped in. Luggage tapped against the lip. The doors drew themselves closed with a whispering kiss softer than a page turning. Steve thumbed the 19. A relay somewhere clicked a crisp insect snap, and the car gave a steadying sigh, cables overhead tightening with a muted feline stretch. The floor indicator above the door glowed up from L to 2. Mary, who hated small boxes that moved, stared into the mirror and told herself to breathe evenly. The mirror stared back without offering advice. For a second, no more, she thought she saw a fourth shape over her shoulder, a smudge only like breath-fogging glass. She blinked, and it was gone. Paul, still filming, caught a reflection in the act of doubting and smiled small. Later, he'd frame the shot and slow it, ask his audience to pause at 0012 and tell him what they saw. As the elevator rose, a faint thread-like whine lifted through the car, the sound of steel on steel pretending to be silk. "Refitted," Steve said. But not too refitted. "Don't," Mary said again, more softly now, like she was talking to herself. At 7, a careful thunk found its way up the shaft, as if a distant door had settled into place somewhere below. A noise so thin it felt like a memory. Paul lowered the camera and looked at the panel of buttons. There were 2 for the lobby L and a brass keyhole where the word operator had once lived. He touched the keyhole's edge and felt old grit the polish had missed. "Ever hear the story?" Joe had asked on the way over while they checked bags in the entry, about the housekeeper. She was hurt here, long time ago, 1930. It was unfair. People say her spirit stayed in the machinery, riding up and down, refusing to leave the thing that failed her. But legends love a place like this. Every old building has one. They had all nodded then, the way you nod when you suspect someone is being sincere about a ghost. At 12, the cables sang a little higher, and the car answered with a mild percussive tock-tock in its bones, the sound a wood table makes when it settles at night. Mary let out a thin laugh. "If this thing drops, I swear I will. You'll," what Steve asked, half a joke, half trying to bait courage out of her. "I'll haunt your cereal," Mary said. "I'll turn your spoons backward. I'll mess with your playlists." The car hummed on. Steve sucked in a breath and held it like a diver arguing with gravity. Then, without warning, the overhead fan gave a single cough, a short, losing steam blur, and the temperature inside the car tipped a degree warmer. "Hello," Paul said to no one, because saying it felt like a way to insist that someone else was here. The panel answered with a tiny electric chirp, the way a smoke detector might when its battery wants attention. Paul raised an eyebrow. "You heard that right," Sure Steve said. "Old buildings are just orchestras with bad conductors." The car slipped past 14, and somewhere below, a faraway metallic slither, not a scrape, not a grind, more like rope, taking a breath, threaded upward. Mary closed her eye. A hush pressed in, the kind of hush you can hear thick-tuned, like the quiet of a church right before the organ speaks. She didn't want to admit that she could feel a presence the way you feel weather through a window. When the doors opened onto 19, the hallway was an elongated mirror of the elevator brass dark wood, a runner laid out like a tongue. Far down the corridor, a cartwheel gave a gentle chitter like beads knocked together. Nobody was there. The cart's shadow rode the wall and then didn't. Paul filmed nothing, and his viewers would later type comments about how nothing is the most frightening thing you can point a camera at. Room 1906 smelled faintly of lemon oil, and old paperbacks kept on nightstands for company. The windows gave them a portion of skyline that looked like a jagged thought. On the desk was a small card under glass, Ashbury Housekeeping Request Call 0. A second card, less official, sat beside it, like a note tossed by someone passing through. If you need extra towels, dial 0. If you hear the elevator after midnight, let it pass. Let it pass, Steve said. Like it's a funeral, Mary picked up the card and turned it over. Nothing on the back, no prankster's scrawl. That's It's marketing, she said. Trust me. Someone in PR thought a dash of folklore would go viral. From the window, the city's noise barged in politely sirens, far enough away to be texture a chorus of distant brakes, a restaurant vent exhaling grease and heat. Paul set up his tripod. He'd planned their first segment to be a walkthrough of the Ashbury's haunted rumor, a kind of good-natured debunking with a willingness to be wrong. He'd tell the camera that the 19th floor was known for its stories because it had the best view, not because of anything the past could still want. He'd make a joke about elevators, how they were simply rooms that agreed to move. Then he saw the book. It was on the bottom shelf of the desk, half tucked behind the room service menu. A skinny ledger, green cloth worn white at the corners, incidents and maintenance. 1929, 1933. He didn't call the others. He lifted it out like a person holds a discovered photograph of themselves. The ink inside looked wobbly, as if the hand that wrote it had been trying to get ahead of time. Most entries were the world's least interesting story. Light replaced 8th floor service closet, new belt, for vent luggage trolley wheel oiled. But there were 2 dark crescent watermarks on one page, and on that page, the entry ran longer. July 13th, 1930. Lift B stalled between L and 3. Operator reported feeling resistance, as though a brake were applied by the shaft itself. Housekeeper initials ER entered to take linens down. Lift resumed unexpectedly, doors closing before fully clear. Operator attempted manual stop. Incident resulted in fatality. Handling discreet. Note the shaft must not choose. Paul felt a cold place in him, open like a pocket. ER, he murmured. Initials only. Find something Steve asked. Paul closed the ledger gently. A story, he said. Mary, trying to wash out of her mind the mirror's brief fourth shape, wandered into the bathroom where a tiny hex tile floor made her feel like she was standing on a sheet of confetti. The faucet coughed once, and she turned it a spurt and a swallow before leveling into a constant hush. Let's do dinner, she called. Then the ghost tour, if we must. They did dinner a narrow bistro around the corner with chairs that made you sit straight and a waiter who pronounced ragu as if it might shatter if he said it too hard. Outside traffic hummed in the alley like a throat clearing every few seconds, human life declaring itself by combustion and impatience. Steve ordered a steak. He shouldn't have. Mary ate half a salad and then half of Steve's fries. And Paul told them about the ledger without telling them what the ledger told him. He didn't want to be the reason they imagined the wrong kind of sleep. They returned to the Ashbury at 11:43. The lobby had altered its sound the way rooms do at night. Volume down bass, up the chandelier's crystals gave a faint tinkle. When a draft found them, the concierge's keyboard offered rubbery thump-thump notes instead of the afternoon's cheerful clicks. The elevators in their bronze frames were darker now, sunbursts gone to shadow. Joe the bellwoman had been replaced by no one. The stand was empty, a plum vest folded over the back of a chair like a skin shed neatly. Somewhere above, a car passed, and the shaft breathed a narrow whoosh that Mary felt on her forearms like a change in weather. She reached for the 19 and stopped. Her finger hovered over the button. Let it pass, she said to herself, not sure why the words insisted. But the indicator arrow was already sliding toward L. A muted ding arrived, like an old gentleman clearing his throat. Come on, Steve said light. We're not about to be the people who wait for a different elevator, because a little card taught us manners. The doors closed behind them with a heavier thud than before, as if the metal had inherited a new opinion. The car smelled faintly what lemon oil, yes, and something else beneath it, a trace of a cold laundry after rain. Paul checked his phone and saw that his video file had corrupted. The bistro's last 2 minutes were nothing but gray. His phone gave a single unhappy beep that sounded more human than it should have. "Signal's weird," he said. Overhead, the fan started with a thin, reluctant whir, like a coin spinning and refusing to lie down. Steve said, "19th floor, please," in a mock formal voice, and pressed the button. The motor answered a steady, oiled purr, and the elevator slid up with the smoothness of a promise. At 8, the car paused. Not a stop. A hesitation so slight you could mistake it for your own pulse tripping. Deep in the shaft, a cable gave a long, slow creak, like a tall door leaning into its hinges. Steve shrugged. "Old bones talk," he said, "like mine after 2 beers." The indicator lights ticked upward. 9, 10, 11. With crisp little pip sounds that might once have been mechanical but were now just tradition. Mary rubbed her arms. "Why does it feel warmer?" she asked. Paul realized he was holding the ledger. He had no memory of pocketing it, but there it was, thin against his palm, as if it had wanted to be carried. He opened it to the page with the water crescents. Between the lines, someone had pressed hard enough to leave a ghost sentence deep in the paper's fiber. He tilted it to the light and saw not words, but the shape words make when they're too ashamed to be read. "Tell me again," Steve said, half to fill the air. "What did the entries say?" "That the shaft must not choose," Paul said. "What is that even?" The light in the ceiling blinked a single stutter that Pixar would have given a face if it were friendlier. From the panel came a dry little shikt, not a spark, more like a fingertip brushing old felt. The car lost an atom's worth of momentum. "Okay," Mary said, breathing deliberately. "Okay, we're fine." The corridor outside 14 sighed through the seams of the door as the elevator passed an exhale cupped by painted wood. Paul imagined he could hear footsteps far away, slow and determined, as if some part of the hotel was keeping pace with them, 1 floor behind, then 1 floor ahead. There was the faintest tap, 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 as though a knuckle tested the shaft from the other side. "Please tell me you hear that," he said. Steve didn't answer right away. He was listening in the way men listen when they are trying not to be seen listening. "I hear old construction," he said. "I hear beams adjusting. I hear the universe resisting metaphors." And then, without fanfare, the car let out a rounded, belly-deep clunk that strode up their legs and made the mirror tremble at the edges. The fan hiccuped with a quick hic, and the motor's purr flattened into a steady, obstinate bzzz that spoke of holding rather than moving. The indicator froze between 15 and 16, a half-lit hyphen. They didn't fall. It's important to say that. The car did not surrender them to the idea of gravity. It stopped and decided to consider. Mary's jaw worked. "Press the button," she said. "Which one?" "All of them." Steve laughed, barked short, and pressed each button, answered with a dull plastic tunk, obedient and useless. Somewhere above, a pulley whispered in a voice of steel floss, "Wait." Paul put his palm to the door seam and felt only temperature, no draft. But in that temperature, there was a story cool, like cellars, like stairwell corners, like the undersides of theater seats. He thought of the housekeeper with the initials ER. He thought of what Joe had not said and what the ledger had refused to fully write. Silence pressed in again, loud enough to hear. It had texture now, the silent grit of time. Then came a sound so small that Mary almost thanked it, the lightest tick of the indicator freeing itself. And the car, with great dignity, resumed its upward slide. The cables above offered a cautious enigni, like a violinist testing a string. And somewhere way down in the throat of the shaft, a counterweight answered with a respectful, distant thud. The doors opened on 19. Mary stepped out first and turned hands on hips like a person reclaiming a world from her own nerves. "See," she said. A hiccup. Behind them, the doors sealed with a firm clap, the kind of sound a teacher makes to bring a classroom to attention. Mary flinched, then pretended she hadn't. Paul angled his camera to catch the reflection in the sunburst. The brass gave back their shape softened and shiny, and for a fraction, he saw something else. A woman's silhouette standing where they had been standing, a profile older than the hotel's renovations, hairpin chin, lifted attention fixed on a floor that no longer existed. He told himself it was the lobby's chandelier canted just right, throwing a ghost of itself up the shaft. It was 11:57 p.m. They would sleep or try to, and tomorrow they would tour the city and drink coffee too strong for their bones, and fight with taxis and return to the Ashbury with socks damp from a brief rain. But this night belonged to the hotel, and the hotel knew it. Paul laid the ledger on the desk and slipped a note beneath it. "For whoever cleaned the room, thank you. This doesn't belong to us." In the hallway, the runner gave off a whispery rush underfoot when they went to get ice, the kind of fabric sound that makes you think of dresses in old films brushing past doorways. From a vent near the elevator bank, a low whoom came and went, like a heartbeat deciding. Steve put a cup under the ice machine's chrome mouth and got 2 cubes and an apology. The machine sputtered with a grudging clack, clack, and then went still like it had talked too much. Back in 1906, the bedspreads were exactly as heavy as they needed to be, and no heavier. From somewhere in the walls, a plumbing line made a startled plink, then considered silence again. Mary stood by the mirror and tried to catch the smudge she had seen earlier, as if the mirror might be convinced to confess. She didn't know why she whispered when she finally spoke. "We're not here for you," she said. "We'll be kind to your rooms." The AC roused itself with a soft thrum, a breeze barely louder than breath. Out in the corridor, a cartwheel offered that same patient chitter like beads, worried by a thoughtful hand, then faded. The clock read 12:04. Midnight had passed. They had not let the elevator pass. Perhaps they had not been meant to. From the elevator shaft, through wood and paint and insulation, a thin, vertical sigh traveled like a rumor finding its ladder. Then very faintly, a ding answered from below the lobby, or memory of it, dainty, distant, almost playful. Steve rolled over. "Please," he said to the dark, "no more metaphors." The room replied with quiet, so deliberate it felt like listening. Paul's last waking thought was of the ledger of the line that knew too much the shaft must not choose. He slept with one hand open on the coverlet, as if he expected someone to put something in it. The Ashbury's corridors did not sleep. By 1 a.m., the city had folded into its own late-night logic, but the hotel still listened. Carpets drank sound. Doors stood polite but not trustworthy. Inside 1906, Steve had collapsed across his bed shoes, still on mumbling about steak and ghosts. Mary scrolled through photos that hadn't turned out the way she hoped, every face shadowed at the edges. Paul, unable to dismiss the ledger's line, "The shaft must not choose," sat by the window, with his camera waiting for silence to become proof. From far down the hall, a rolling squeak arrived, the sound of a cart's wheel hesitating, resuming, hesitating again. Mary lifted her head. "Joe," she whispered. But the hall beyond the peephole was still lit by wall sconces that hummed faintly. The bulbs gave a low zzz, like bees that had been trapped too long. Paul checked the time, 1:13. "We should try to sleep," he said. "We've got a whole day tomorrow." But Steve was restless, turning over with the noise of a body trying to shake off a thought. "I want another look," he said. "That thing, it didn't just stop. It watched us. You felt it." Mary groaned. "Please don't start." "No, listen," Steve pressed. "Buildings get moods. That car's mood was wrong." He pulled on his jacket. "Come with me. Quick trip. 1 floor down and back, that's all." Paul hesitated. But the promise of footage late-night elevator test haunted hotel vibe was enough to lure him. "Fine," he said. "One ride?" Mary sighed so hard it sounded like surrender. "You two will kill me before the ghost does." They walked the carpet runner toward the elevator bank. Every step set off a muffled whoomph, as if the floor absorbed their weight and didn't want to return it. At the end of the hall, the sunburst doors stood waiting, darker now than before. Somewhere in the shaft, a cable groaned, a long, drawn-out nunt that felt almost organic. Paul hit the down button. The panel gave a ding high, but cracked as if the sound itself were tired. The arrow slid toward 19. Metal clatters echoed up the shaft, irregular like someone climbing hand over hand on a ladder they shouldn't. "Don't," Mary whispered. "Let it pass." But Steve stepped forward as the doors parted. The car yawned open, its mirror showing only the three of them, and a dark line down its center that looked like a seam refusing to heal. The brass rails gleamed as if polished just for them. "See," Steve said, grinning, inviting us. The doors closed with a snap sharper than before, like jaws testing their bite. He pressed the button for 18. The motor above gave a low hum, and the car slid downward smooth at first. Then halfway between floors, a jolt struck short, percussive, the sound of a train hitting a switch wrong. Mary stumbled against the rail. "Nope," she said. "Nope, nope, nope." The cables whined a tightening I-E, then loosened with a quick metallic clank. The car stopped. Lights did not go out. That somehow was worse. They burned steady, revealing only what they were meant to reveal. Steve pushed the buttons again, L17 too. Each press made the same dull thunk without result. Paul lifted his camera recording. "This is good," he said nervously. "Great atmosphere." Above them, something heavy scraped, slow, deliberate like metal dragged across bone. Steve looked up at the ceiling panel. "That's not maintenance," he muttered. A faint tap, tap, tap came from the mirror, as though knuckles rapped glass from inside. Mary covered her mouth. "She's here," she whispered. The car shuddered once, twice. Then the doors opened, not onto a hallway, but onto darkness. The shaft itself gaping. No floor, just the black throat of the building. Air rushed in with a hollow pee, and the cables above sang a taut, high zing. Steve, reckless in fear or bravado, stepped toward the gap. "It's just a malfunction," he said. "Look, nothing here." "Steve, don't." Mary reached, but too late. The doors slammed inward with impossible speed. A crash thundered metal against bone, an inhuman crunch that echoed up and down the shaft like laughter without breath. Steve screamed once, cut off mid-breath, his body caught between doors that should never have been strong enough to do more than close. The cables rattled violently, a chick-chick of teeth grinding. The motor overhead gave a low, satisfied groan. Blood did not spray. The hotel did not allow spectacle. What remained was sound, the echo of crushing, the reverberation of steel, announcing its triumph. The doors slid shut again. When they reopened, Steve was gone. Mary screamed. Paul dropped the camera. The floor shook with a dull thud, thud like a giant heartbeat trying to imitate human rhythm. He's gone, Paul stammered. It took him. Mary pressed against the corner, tears brimming. "We have to get out. Now." But the elevator had other plans. The indicator above flickered lights, pinging in nonsense, order 312B7. Each ping was too loud, sharp enough to sting. The car lurched upward, then downward, as if the shaft itself couldn't decide. Paul scrambled for the emergency phone. The receiver was there, heavy, cool. He lifted it. Instead of a dial tone, a breathy hiss filled his ear, soft at first, then rising to a shrill scree that forced him to drop it. The handset swung, hitting the wall with a lonely clack, clack, clack. Mary whispered through sobs, "ER. The housekeeper. It's her." The mirror quivered, giving off a faint ripple sound like disturbed water. In its surface shapes gathered laundry carts, a uniform cap, a woman's face blurred as if seen through steam. Her mouth opened. No sound came yet. The cables above wailed a metallic ee, like a scream forced through wire. Paul punched the door with his fists. The thuds echoed back, doubled, as though someone on the other side struck in perfect rhythm. Boom! 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 The car stopped. The doors opened to 12th floor. Normal hallway, carpet, lamps, safety, go, Mary shrieked. She lunged forward. Paul hesitated, torn between escape and the pull of the story. Behind him, the mirror showed Steve still. Steve's crushed face twisted, his eyes wide, hand outstretched. But when Paul turned, nothing was there. They bolted into the hallway. The doors slid shut. From behind the elevator exhaled one last sigh, slow, satisfied. The 12th floor corridor stretched out like a throat-patterned carpet, leading to doors that didn't want to open. Mary's pulse was so loud, she could feel it in her teeth. Paul dragged her forward. They half ran, half stumbled, looking for stairs, for an exit, for anything that wasn't brass and shadow. Behind them, the elevator doors closed with a metallic slam, hard enough to echo 3 times before the sound died. Mary froze. Paul pulled her wrist. "Don't look back," he whispered. "Please." But she did. The sunburst doors were still there, reflecting nothing but hallway light. Still, silent, waiting. They found the stairwell at the far end, a steel door that resisted until Paul shoved it open. The hinges shrieked, E-K, metal, grinding against itself, the sound of something woken reluctantly. Inside, the stairs spiraled down in concrete paint, flaking like dead skin. Cold air pressed up from below. Mary clutched the rail. Finally, stairs don't lie. But the stairwell was not silent. Somewhere above, a faint clink, clink, clink descended, steady, metallic, deliberate. Paul tilted his head up. "What is that?" Mary shook her head. "Ignore it. Just go." They hurried down 3 flights. The sound followed closer. Each clink was sharper, like a hook biting steel. Paul stopped, breathing hard. It's not footsteps. It's the stairwell vibrated with a long ree, as if a massive cable scraped its housing. Dust rained down from overhead. Mary screamed. "She's in the walls." Paul grabbed her shoulder. "Keep moving." They burst onto the 9th floor, panting. The hallway was worse dark, with only every 3rd light working. The bulbs buzzed with an electric zzz, uneven like flies trapped against glass. Shadows lay thick at the corners, stretching toward them. Mary leaned against the wall. I can't breathe." She pressed her palms to her chest. "It's like the air's tighter." Paul listened. Somewhere in the distance, the low whir of the elevator stirred a predator, clearing its throat. "She knows where we are," he whispered. The elevator at the end of the hall dinged. Not cheerful, sharp, broken, like a bell cracked down the middle, D-N-G. The doors opened. Inside, the car was empty. But the mirrors shimmered cloudy, and something moved behind its surface hands, folding linen, then bloodied linen, then empty hands again. Mary staggered back. No. The cables above gave a sudden snap ping, a note that ricocheted down the shaft. Paul yanked her away. Don't look, but Mary couldn't. The reflection had fixed her. Her own face stared back, but the mouth moved out of sync. The reflection whispered words she couldn't hear, lips shaping syllables. Then the hands of her reflection reached upward into the ceiling. From above, the shaft moaned with a grrrah, cables uncoiling like serpents waking. The sound grew, filling the hallway, wrapping it like a second skin. Mary screamed and bolted. They reached another stairwell, but the door wouldn't budge. Paul rammed his shoulder. Nothing. The lock rattled with a cruel chi-nki, laughing at effort. Mary pounded with her fists until her knuckles stung. "Let us out," she cried. Her pounding echoed back, boom, boom, twice as loud, like fists from the other side. She jerked away. She's there. She's everywhere. A metallic slither filled the ceiling. A cable dropped, black, gleaming, hissing, like wet rope through a pulley. It dangled in the center of the hall, swaying. Paul backed away, shaking his head. That's not possible. The cable twisted toward Mary, as if it smelled her. It gave a sharp twang as it tightened, vibrating with a note that set her teeth on edge. Mary stumbled. The cable snapped out fast as a whip. It coiled around her wrist. She shrieked. Paul helped. Paul lunged, grabbing her free arm. The cable pulled with a woof, amp, dragging her across the carpet, the fibers rasping in protest. He pulled back, tendons straining. "I've got you." But the cable wrapped her torso, pinning her arms, then her throat. The fibers creaked as they cinched a violin string, tuning itself too tight. Mary gagged. Her eyes bulged. "No!" Paul screamed. He clawed at the steel coil, but it only bit deeper. Each pull made a K sound, vertebrae under siege. Mary's body lifted off the floor, dragged toward the elevator shaft. Her shoes kicked, scraping the wall. Each kick thudded with a desperate thump, 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 softer and softer. "Let her go," Paul shouted into the dark. His words fell flat. The hotel had no interest in bargains. The doors to the elevator opened behind her. Inside, only blackness. The cable pulled. Mary's body slammed against the threshold. The impact landed with a brutal wud air, leaving her lungs in a ragged gasp. She managed one last look at Paul. Her lips formed words, "Don't follow." Then the cable constricted with a final crack, a splintering snapping cord that rang like timber breaking in a storm. Her body went limp. The cable loosened, releasing her. She vanished into the shaft. From below, a hollow thump rose, echoing upward endlessly, the sound of something dropped into a well with no bottom. Paul collapsed to his knees, trembling. The hallway was silent again. Too silent. Then faintly, the elevator dinged, cheerful now, like a waiter announcing dinner. For a long half-minute, Paul remained kneeling on the 9th floor carpet where Mary had disappeared, his palms pressed flat as if he could hold the building still by touch alone. He felt the weave under his skin, synthetic, old, too clean, and tried to let the mindless pattern numb him. But the hotel did not permit numbness. It wanted awareness. It wanted witnesses. Far down the corridor, a muted tunk drifted like a heartbeat, heard through drywall. Closer by the air vent exhaled a tired whoom, a breath that didn't warm anything. From the elevator bank behind him, a bright, falsely cheerful ding pecked at the silence. He stood. The runner wasn't steady under his feet anymore. It felt like a river pretending to be a hallway. He wiped at his face and realized there were no tears to clear. Shock had eaten them. He turned toward the elevator and forced himself to look. The bronze doors were closed. Nothing marked them. No smear, no scuff, no proof. Let it pass, he whispered the words on the card from their room, though he knew the advice applied to a different midnight than this one. A lone bulb above him fizzed with a thin zeest, then steadied as if embarrassed. He made himself move. There would be people downstairs. Night staff. Someone with keys and sense. He needed the lobby, the desk, a human face that wasn't trapped behind a mirror or pinned inside a story from 1930. He set off toward the central floor landing where the main stairwell would be. His shoe soles thumped a steady hup-hup rhythm on the runner, too loud in the hush. From within the walls, a shirring shurr followed along like fabric being folded by invisible hands, keeping pace with him. He found the door to the stairwell and pushed the crash bar. It gave a metallic sklack and swung inward with a rubber-lipped sow. Concrete steps spiraled down around a central square of air where dust motes hovered like exhausted stars. A painted stencil warned no roof access, as if anyone would choose up instead of out. Paul leaned over the rail. Down was a well. Up was worse. He started down. The first step landed with a hollow buck. The second answered with another buck higher in pitch like a question. Somewhere below, faint and regular, a tap. Tap. Tap kept time, not footfalls, but a tool striking metal. He hugged the rail and made for the 8th floor. The door there didn't resist. He shouldered through and blinked. The corridor's carpet pattern was identical to 9's, but the framed photographs on the walls were different black and white studies of bellboys and trunks instead of the sepia skylines upstairs. He didn't trust the change. He trusted it more than the elevator. Behind him in the stairwell, a ropey whoosh uncoiled, and then settled as though something had changed its mind. He hurried toward the elevator call buttons at mid-hall and thumbed the intercom plate, instead the one that said, "House Phone." The tiny speaker gave a brittle st like cellophane rubbed together. Then a voice came in pieces, syllables snagging, riding static, a whisper stitched with limp desk. "How may I?" ending in a brittle cat. Underneath the words, faint and relentless, was the rhythmic click-click of a rotary dial returning to 0 from a call long ago. "Please," Paul said so soft he hardly qualified as speaking. "We need help. Someone is hurt. Please send." The sentence emptied. Hurt, he realized, was a civilian word for what had happened. The hotel would not let him use it here. He tried again. "Send security. Send anyone." A long, flat hiss bled through the speaker, flowery and endless. Beneath it, a woman's voice came like a recording left too near a magnet. "Laundry. Down. Down. Down." And the word stepped on itself until it became only down. The plate grew cold under his thumb. He pulled back. In the glass of a framed photo to his right, he saw a woman's profile. The neat twist of hair, the soft hollow where the jaw traveled beneath the ear, the clean, plain line of a uniform's collar. He turned to the photo itself. The image showed no woman. It showed 3 bellboys, all grinning, all alive. "ER," he said, and the initials felt like a name even without vowels. A faint knit of floorboards flexed behind him as if someone had stepped onto a plank and then lifted their weight at the last moment. He kept moving. The service corridor felt nearer on 8. He could smell something like lemon oil threaded with an old damp that buildings never cured. He found a door marked linen and tried it. Unlocked. Inside shelves of folded towels, folded sheets, folded silence. Even the quiet in that room had a noise to it, a cottony that sat in the ears like a fingertip. A laundry chute opened onto a square shaft, ribbed with tin. A faded sign warned, "No wet items." Paul stepped closer. The chute's darkness had a character of its own. Not black, not depth. More like a mouth, politely closed. "Did they put you down here?" He asked the air, and he wasn't sure what he meant. "Did they put your duties here? Did they put your story here? Did they put you here somewhere? Very far away?" A tiny tick answered like a pin, finding a tabletop. He backed out of the closet and closed the door. He wasn't going to be lured sideways by small doors, while the big one, the lobby, waited below. He returned to the stairwell and started down again. Above him, a length of unseen metal uttered a low groan as it warmed with friction. The stairwell air carried a barely there chime every 6 or 7 steps, as if the building's bones were counting for him. On 7, the door bar didn't give. He pushed again. The bar knocked out a blunt clunk, stubborn and dull. He swore tried 6, unlocked. He stepped out and felt a wet draft against his face like breath that had passed through the wash first. The elevator doors at the end of this hallway stood ajar by an inch, as if someone had neglected to let them finish deciding. From within that inch of darkness came a faint, breathy hiss, the sound a throat makes when it refuses to clear. "Not now," he said to it. "Not me." He moved down the corridor toward the exit sign instead. He could smell city, real city, inches away, a metallic outdoorness night on stone, the char of last week's pretzel cart. The exit should have opened onto a service alley. It would have in the version of the hotel that obeyed maps. The panic bar thunked a promising chunk when he hit it. The door gave a shudder like a cold animal. Then quietly, it settled and locked the latch, making a prim tick. "Come on," he begged. "Please." Behind him, the elevator doors at the hall's far end slid the last inch with a sober shh. The indicator above them spat out a jittery ping, ping, ping numbers, false starting lightning out of order B151M. Down inside the shaft, a cable let go of violin-thin testing tension. The sunburst in the bronze reflected him as a dark version of himself, older, thinner, less correct. He wanted to run. He wanted to take the stairs up or down or through or into a closet and barricade himself with sheets. Instead, he walked because if he ran, he would not stop, and if he did not stop, he would not choose, and the shaft would. He stopped an arm's length from the doors. "Please," he said, and he wasn't sure to whom. "I am sorry for what they did to you. I am sorry they made you heavy with work and invisible while doing it. I am sorry they did not hold the door." A soft, almost domestic ch replied like a tongue placed gently against teeth in sympathy. Then from somewhere near his left ear, impossible, came a polite, "Excuse me," whispered in breath that wasn't his, wrapped in a faint rustle of starched cotton. He didn't turn. He couldn't bear to. He looked instead at the thin seam between the elevator doors. There was dark there. And in the dark, a suggestion of motion, as if anything that moved was moving toward him. The doors opened. There was no car. Air tore past him in a forceful hurrumph, a lungful stolen by a building. The cables above sang out a raw yee, the shaft converting tension into voice. A pulse of machinery down below answered with a solemn thoom, 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 steady as an old engine that had learned grief. The opening made a square, blacker than black. The silver rails winked twin tracks into a void. The counterweight unseen was a rumor on the other side. Paul's knees said no. His ankles said no. His center of gravity leaned forward to whisper anyway. He grabbed the bronze jam with both hands. Edges bit his palms. For a second, he managed to laugh hollow high, not something he recognized as his, at the ridiculousness of the thing. The elevator had refused to be present for its own invitation. The exit had offered itself as nothing. Behind him, a slow set of footsteps stitched a tap, tap, tap into the carpet he just crossed. A second set overlapped lighter patient the tip of a maid's shoes that had never scuffed. Between them, the silence filled with a soft shh, like sheets being smoothed onto an invisible bed. ER, he said again, and now he did turn. The hallway was empty. The sound of his turning had no companion. The shaft breathed a longer deep and cool, as if the building were smelling him to be sure. A plink answered from far below, reminiscent of a drop of water testing an iron lip. Paul took a step back from the edge. The shaft disagreed. It did not yank him. It did not pull as a hand pulls. It negotiated with the air stole. His balance shifted the room by a degree. His weight went where a weight goes when the floor tells it a secret. He teetered, found the jam again, clamped down, and pressed his body sideways. The right-hand door wanted to close against him. The left wanted to open wider. The bronze frame had opinions. He snaked 1 foot behind him, heel-hunting carpet, and found none. The rails inside the shaft keened a clean E, a knife-edged note like glass on glass. Somewhere above, a brake slipped with a curt chack. Below, a cable rolled on itself with a heavy rrr, the sound of muscle remembering work. Then something touched his ankle. Not a hand, not a cable, not a definable thing. It was the gravity of attention. It was the weight of being noticed by a story that had decided you were part of its plot. In that instant, a thread-like zit coursed under his skin from heel to calf, the nervous system shouting in its own tiny electricity. He kicked. He didn't connect with anything. His left hand slid a centimeter on the bronze. The elevator doors thought about closing. They didn't. The shaft thought about swallowing. It did. The floor under his planted foot wasn't there anymore. The fall wasn't an event. It wasn't even an action. It was a sentence missing its middle, begun casually and ending in a new grammar. He dropped forward. Wind shouldered his chest with a round, compressing breath to coin size. The darkness roared in a variable rrrr, retuning around him as the shaft's width changed with each passing floor. Numbers on the indicator above whisked by out of sequence, each accompanied by an asynchronous ping that arrived a half-second too early or late. A cable to his right sang a stern yeen, while the counterweight's path answered with a spaced thud, thud, thud like distant footfalls. He tried to catch the guide rail. His fingers grazed cold steel and skittered off a soundless refusal. He became a series of attempts that didn't take. Arms pinwheeling, knees tucking, mind reducing, hold reach, stop live. The shaft coughed out a gritty kick of dust, peppering his face and tongue with the taste of old work. From above, vanishing quickly, a door somewhere let loose a lonely clack, as if an empty hallway had just lost its audience. For a breath length, his fall slowed. The air thickened. The darkness brightened by a shade that wasn't light, but memory. He saw no. He was shown a flash the operator's hat with the hotel's emblem, a hand on a lever, the gloved knuckles tight. He saw the housekeeper in profile jar. A laundry bag hugged against her chest, her chin lifting not out of pride but out of habit. The way a person says, "I am here," in a place that treats presence like error. He saw the door closing, not maliciously, but mechanically. The indifferent murder of instructions followed exactly. Over all of it lay a humming like a hymn had been turned into machinery. "Not me," he tried to say to the machine, and the hymn, and the woman, and the lever, and the year that couldn't stop itself from reenacting. "Please, not me." But the shaft drank his word with a soft mup, polite as a cloth laid over a spoon. Floors blurred. He fell through 1098, or perhaps he fell past the same floor repeated because the hotel could print it in any order it wanted. His senses magnified details that weren't going to help: a discarded paperclip on a sill, a hairline crack in a landing tile, a spider's thread shaking in the wind of him. The cables combined their voices into a braided E-O-E, a chorus arguing with itself. Somewhere very far down, a depth struck a depth and returned a patient boom, the echo of an echo, with nowhere else to go. Above a torn belt flapped a lazy flap. Flap, an afterthought left over from a renovation that had not gone deep enough. The thought came ridiculous valiant, that he could spread himself into the shaft's corners and slow. He flung his arms, hit nothing that wanted him. He thought of Steve's grin before the doors. He thought of Mary's last look, "Don't follow." He realized he had followed anyway, the way a word follows its own etymology back into a root that explains too much and changes nothing. He turned in the air. He didn't know which way was up. He didn't know if it mattered. The air around him began to whistle thin at first, then rising to a needle thread, a sound that stitched him to the drop. From the side walls, a rapid tick-tick-tick issued as rivets reported his passing. His own heart contributed, a heavy thump-thump-thump audible to him, in places the ears, the wrists, where it shouldn't be. He closed his eyes. It didn't make anything dark. He opened them. It didn't make anything real. He reached once more for language. "You weren't held," he told ER in his head. "No one held the door. I am holding nothing either." In answer, the shaft sent up a dim that could have been wind or woman or wire agreement without comfort. Was there a floor he didn't know? The building might be taller inside than outside. The hotel might have decided that the longest fall was kinder than the sharpest stop, or that there was a way to make an ending that felt like an answer, and that way was without a rival. Then the sounds receded, the roar thinning to a hiss, the ping spacing into a stray ping. Now and then the thuds below flattening to a far The last thing he truly heard was his name, unwinding itself into breath, Powell, stretched long, turned to air, then to nothing. He did not think of the ledger. He did not think of the note under the glass in the desk. He did not think of what it meant that the shaft must not choose. He thought briefly of the city outside and the way it never slept because it never dreamed. It was always awake precisely because of nights like this, tucked into buildings like this, while people like him mistook chandeliers for stars. And then he stopped thinking. He did not strike a floor. He did not land. He continued. Somewhere very high now, an elevator door closed with a compassionate clack, quiet as a hand soft closing a child's bedroom at night. Somewhere else closer, the motor let go a weary and settled into idling. On the 9th floor, where a man had knelt until belief broke, the air vent resumed its even In the linen closet on 8, the quiet kept its small a thimble of noise in a room without anyone. The Ashbury listened. If buildings had eyelids, it would have lowered its own. In the lobby, far below, a bell chimed a delicate ding to no one, and footsteps answered with a professional tap-tap across marble. The revolving door whispered a low swoosh, admitting new guests to the hour that would belong to them. He was below all of that now, and above it, and threaded through it the way a story threads through a place after everyone who made it has gone. If there was an end to his drop, it did not feel like a surface. It felt like a decision the hotel would make later during its turn-down service, when it touched every sheet to promise sleep and meant it. The Ashbury stood as it always had. Brass polished marble gleaming chandelier, dripping light in steady constellations. The night that had claimed 3 travelers did not linger on the facade. From the street, the building was innocent, welcoming. Only the shaft knew. In the lobby, the revolving door sighed with a low whoosh as 2 new guests stepped through laughing at some private joke. Their bags rolled obediently behind them. They were young, tired, eager for the promise of sheets and skyline. The desk clerk looked up from his register. "Welcome to the Ashbury," he said with his professional calm, as if nothing in the world were unusual. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yeah." One said, sliding over his phone with the email open. 2 nights. High floor if you've got it. The clerk's smile did not flicker. 19th, he said. "You'll like the view." Behind them, the elevator dinged a crisp, perfect tone. No crack, no shadow. Its doors parted smoothly to reveal walnut and brass, the mirror clean enough to double every movement. Empty. Waiting. The guests wheeled their bags forward. One turned to the other. "Pretty fancy," he said. "Old but classy." The doors closed with a soft shh, almost affectionate. The motor above purred as silky cables tightening with a cat-like The indicator light pinged L to 2, then to 3, climbing in perfect order. No screams, no shadows, no broken sequence. Just machinery working as designed, carrying its newest story upward. On the 19th floor, room 1906 waited. The beds were turned down. Fresh cards sat under glass. Ashbury housekeeping request call 0. And the second card, the one less official, had been replaced. Its edges were crisp again, its ink dark. "If you hear the elevator after midnight, let it pass." From the hallway, a cartwheel chittered faintly, as though a maid was just turning the corner. The elevator doors shut with a gentle clack. Somewhere in the shaft, a cable whispered a patient sure, preparing for whatever came next. The chandelier downstairs glittered. The clerk returned to his register. The lobby breathed, and the Ashbury Hotel went on, waiting for midnight.